Hello, this is Randy Ripke, and we're going to be talking about Daisy on this video. The screen you're looking at right now is my phone, and that is Daisy the dog. Let's press the Daisy icon here and see Daisy the app. And it asks for a login PIN, just to keep people out of this app because there is some sensitive data in here, obviously. This is the home screen of Daisy, and we're looking at a snapshot of what's going on with my business as of this very moment. We've taken 770 calls. Our average time to answer is 16.6 seconds. Our abandon rate is 9%. During the last 60 minutes, we've answered 69 calls, and the 60 minutes prior to that, we've answered 71 calls. Our service level is at 64%. And below that is now the chart. And all those spaghetti lines, green one is percent answered. The gold line is the service level. Blue are inbound calls. Red is number of agents. The purple line is the average time to answer. And the white line shows outbound call activity. If you touch the screen anywhere, you can get a white line, which will help you see that right here at right about 6, 7 o'clock this morning, calls started picking up and our service levels went down. As we staffed up, those service levels improved. It seems we peaked with calls right about 10, 11 o'clock, and they've been tapering off this afternoon. So you can see, as expected, as that call volume rose and then fell, so did service levels, percent answered, and average time to answer. So if this is too much spaghetti going on here for you, you can turn off these lines. These rows slide back and forth. So if you want to turn off, say, percent answered, and turn off average time to answer, those are kind of the lines that I like to see. Outbound calls is always a small number relative to inbound calls. So it's always down toward the bottom and out of the way. I want to know how many agents are on, how many inbound calls we've had, how our service levels look, that sort of thing. As I turn on answered and average time to answer, you can kind of see that the percent answered is kind of reflecting the service level, and average time to answer, same thing. As the service levels go down, the average time to answer went up a little bit. This top bar also slides across, so I can look at how many calls were assigned today. I can look at how many, outbound calls that were made today, along with average talk time, and how many calls were on hold. Now, I'm going to go from here, and I'm going to click on the lower right gear, which is the settings button, and talk about settings for a minute. So when I'm doing this analysis of abandon rates and average time to answer and so forth, we're using these settings, which are all user defined. So I'm defining a minimum call as being 5 seconds. And the reason for that is, some people, when the call forwarding hits in, they can hear that click, or they can differentiate between the sound of the ring and they hang up. So I don't want to penalize my agents or myself as far as service levels by including those calls that we couldn't possibly have answered anyway. So for me, if a call is less than 5 seconds, we don't include those when we do our service level calculations. Same thing for calls that abandoned during the pre-screen. I have that turned on so that we ignore calls that abandoned during the pre-screen, because the pre-screen is kind of designed to filter out calls. So you don't want to be penalized for calls that abandoned during the pre-screen. That's the function of the pre-screen. The data refresh rate is how often Daisy requeries MySQL servers at StarTel. Week starts on Sunday. This is for when you're looking at charts, you can look at a week, and mine starts on Sunday. The increment, I'll go back to this in a minute. This is the data points that we're charting, the time increment, and I'll show you that in just a moment. The service level formula is, we're using one. We have 3 of them. They're defined in the documentation for DAISY. The goal average time to answer, my goal is 20 seconds. If we can answer a call within 20 seconds, I think we're doing pretty good. In general, we achieve that. Smooth chart lines is, I prefer those. You can also have straight chart lines. It's kind of a personal preference as to how you want to view that data. It's how the line goes from point to point based on your increment. Now below that are the types of holds. Now the only hold that I'm concerned about is a system hold. System hold is when the caller calls into your switch and the call rings, then the PAA plays, and then they go on hold. That would be a system hold. The other types of holds are generally agent initiated during the process of handling a call. I'm not as concerned about those. I'm more concerned about the holds that the caller experiences when they call in before an agent answers the call. Going back to the blue button here, the home button, I'll go back to my home page. Another menu that's available at the upper right, these 3 little lines, will bring up a couple of reports that we have. And this export all call details, what we're going to be studying in just a minute, that will export a CSV file to whatever email address you specify, and that has all the call detail for the entire day. And we'll be looking at that very closely next. Pressing the blue button again brings me back to my home screen. Now while I'm here, I can do a 2-finger right swipe and look at yesterday. So those are my statistics and my charts for yesterday. I can do a 1-finger right swipe and push the data over 1 hour. I can do a 1-finger left swipe and put it back to where it was. I can push on the blue home button again and go back to today's date. Now during today, we're looking at from midnight through the 4 o'clock hour. Now since I'm looking at a 2-hour increment, the last complete 2-hour segment was at 4 o'clock. It's a little after, it's 5:40 here right now. If I want to look at a shorter duration, like say I want to look at the last 3 hours, and a 2-hour increment isn't going to show me much data during a 3-hour period, so I like to go down to about 20 minutes. So in 20 minutes, I can get a more detailed picture of what's been going on the last 3 hours. Now here's where you get a little too much spaghetti going on, but it really illustrates the effect of, as the call volume increases, as that blue line is going up, you can see the average time to answer went up, percent answer dipped down. Now notice also that outbound calls picked up. So it looks like probably one agent, if not more, was out of rotation or handling outbound calls. So that was one less agent handling inbound calls. So service levels took a dip right about here at about 3 o'clock. So once those outbound calls got handled, you can see the service level picked back up again, the average time to answer improved, and percent answer improved. And you can look at different durations of 1 hour, 3 hours. Again, the 1-finger right swipe will push you through 1 hour at a time. I can look at a 6-hour period. And now with a 20-minute increment, it's kind of scrunched up a little bit. So I can change that to maybe a 30-minute increment. And it's a little bit smoother. And again, I can do a 1-finger right swipe and push the data 1 hour in either direction, forward or backward. Also available, we're still doing more development on this, is a month view or a week view. And on these, I kind of prefer to turn off some of these other lines on here and just look at calls. So here's my traffic pattern for Sunday. You can see we're busier on Monday, pretty steady during the course of the week. And then today is where we are today. For the month, you can kind of see where Sundays fall, and then the Mondays after tend to be a little bit busier, and then during the week it's more stable. So we're back here to today, and I'm going to go back to my 2-hour increment and turn back on all my chart lines. And there we go. Now looking at today, I can press on this colorful button at the bottom and see all of my agents that have worked today and how many inbound calls each one has answered, how many outbound calls they've answered, and their average talk times. Very soon, with version 16.1 on StarTel, I'll have the state of the agent indicated on this display. This will show if the agent is in rotation or out, if they're on a call. Give us a lot more information, almost dashboard style, because the rate of return, the refresh rate, can be very fast. So we can have pretty much live time as far as what agents are doing. So that'll be coming soon. And let's go now to look at some of this data that we're collecting and compare the results with what we see in StarTel. Okay, so now we have a spreadsheet open, and this is the all call export from yesterday. So you can see that we have 1,190 calls that came in yesterday, and we have, if you take out the header row, 1,190 inbound call records. From these, what I've done is taken out pieces of the data so we can look at them and compare the calculations with what you're seeing on Daisy, so you can see how they're arrived at. So holds, for example, these are all call records that had a system hold duration. So if we look at Daisy, and bring up the holds, we see 353, so that matches. And here's our calculation of the average hold time, which is also matching. These are the calls that were answered, and our average time to answer. I'm calculating 24.43 seconds, Daisy's showing 23.2. I think that rounding difference is likely due to additional decimal places that we're not showing in this report, but we're within a second there, so I'm pretty happy with that. I'll come back to this service level calculation in just a moment. Now, for a call to be answered, the two-agent answer time would be greater than 0. So these are all calls that were answered by an agent. Now, these are the calls that were answered within goal. So of all the calls that were answered, 664 were answered within a two-agent answer time of 20 seconds, which is my goal time to answer. Now here are all abandons. These are all call records where the two-agent answer time is 0 because it never had an agent. So if we take all of these calls, and the math I'm doing here is there were 282 abandons. However, we had 39 abandons that were abandoned in less than our minimum call duration of 5 seconds. And then we also had 47 calls that abandoned during pre-screen. And this is where, I'm going to slide this over just a little bit so you can see it. The ATSI pre-screen is greater than 0. So for the calls that abandoned that had pre-screen time, we had 47 of those. So back to our abandon calculation, we're taking the 282 total abandons, subtracting those that abandoned because the call duration was less than 5 seconds, and also subtracting those that abandoned during the pre-screen, divided into the total number of calls that hit our switch. I'm getting 16.47. Daisy is showing 16% here. So that's matching up real nice. Going back to here, and we're doing our service level calculation. Calls available to be answered are 1104. Now, for a call to be available to be answered, those would be the calls that were actually answered, the 908, and then those calls that abandoned less the ones that we exclude due to minimum call duration or an abandon during pre-screen. So these are abandons. If you take 282 minus the 39 and minus the 47, that could have been answered, plus the ones that were actually answered gives us the total that were available to be answered. 664 are the total that were answered within our goal, and our calculation comes up at 60%, and I'm showing 57 here, so we're pretty close. So again, likely a rounding issue. So I'm pretty happy with the math. We're taking into consideration our user-defined minimum call durations and abandons during pre-screen, and doing some very good calculations that we can rely on as far as our analysis of service levels. So any questions, give me a shout. I hope you enjoy your use of DAISY, and that'll be the end of our video. Thank you. Bye-bye.